culture? Can we, as citizens of India, preserve and conserve our heritage? Can we inculcate in the younger generation a sense of pride for our heritage? Can we bring heritage education to the forefront and thus ensure a long term concern for heritage? Can we keep alive our living heritage and support traditional crafts and communities? Can we care for our built environment, our monuments, our landmarks by protecting them and initiating their conservation? Can we care for our natural environment, our lakes, our forests, our water bodies, whether it be our historical buildings, arts and crafts, living traditions, flora, fauna, or landscapes? All these are ours to look after, to nurture, to protect, and to preserve. As our collective responsibility, let us join hands to protect what we have inherited. We are mere custodians of what rightly belongs to our children. I look forward to an engaging morning and our speakers' thoughts and ideas on heritage and citizenship. Before I hand over to Nalini Thakur, may I just briefly introduce her? Nalini Thakur is the former Dean of Studies at the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, and she has been the head of the Department of Architectural Conservation. She's worked as a full-time faculty there for almost 40 years. Nalini Thakur was the first Charles Wallace Trust scholar from India to be sent to the University of York to do specialization in architectural conservation. She's developed good practices of conservation through many experimental projects. She's worked on World Heritage sites of Khajuraho, Champaner, Pavagadh, and prepared the integrated management plan for Hampi for the ASI, which contributed to the removal of the site from the endangered list. For the government of Manipur, the conservation of Kangla Fort as an archaeological park. She's also had international teaching experience, which include the MIT Cambridge, NTNU Trondheim, Norway, and the IOE Tribhuvan University at Nepal. Through her journey, she's been a professional, an academician, a teacher, mentor, and an activist. May I welcome Nalini, please?
Sorry, I couldn't find.
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you very much, Sujata, for introducing me so nicely. I'm really happy. I mean, I really appreciate it. And the title of my webinar, my title is Introduction to Webinar Heritage and Citizenship. As that is the title that I was given, and that is what I will look at. First of all, thank you very much, Sujata and Deepika, for having invited me to this webinar. I am really appreciated and I'm very grateful, and it is indeed an honor. So so thank you. Then I will now put down a few points about heritage, and because I don't think we can do, and I think it's very important to bring out few, because then you can discuss more. Okay, so the 1980s was a landmark decade for in India's heritage movement. INTAC was born in this decade to take care of the unprotected heritage, and also at the same time the first master's program in architectural conservation also started at SPA Delhi. I was fortunate to be a faculty member at that point in the Department of Architecture, and I sort of moved to conservation. And at that point, there was not much known about conservation. I had to figure out a way of learning and teaching, because it was not even a subject at that point. It was not even known as a subject at that point. So I had to figure out a way of learning and teaching in higher education. So I think that is what I will like to sort of bring forward a bit. And I'm happy to tell you, at that point, the Constitution of India was my Bhagavad Gita. And because there was nobody to really advise how do you how does conservation happen in an architecture school, which is, of course, has to be different from what or the way the archaeologists are looking at it. So I had to really figure out all that, really the scope of the subject, how to go about it, how to develop the techniques for it, to sort of for the various aspects and tasks that come. So I'm really happy to now see. Next I went for for this talk. I briefly went through the available material on INTAC's more recent division on heritage education and communication service. I was active in INTAC, but in the 80s, and so I think this is a new generation that's there, and I observe that they are also rooting their work and with the focus on Constitution of India, which is the way to go. Now let us, and it's a very large subject, and the potential of this is very high. The scale is large, and the potential is also large. So let us now, let us see how the constitutional, in this webinar, I think the idea I want to bring out is to see how the constitutional direction can help to formulate innovative heritage education, training and training programs. So for that, I will first start about what is built heritage, and it is it is a resource, and that now we know that we have to take care and safeguard all resources, because they don't, like natural resource, forest, etc. So this is also an irreplaceable resource, but it is a resource that has been, that has evolved with human interaction, human creation, etc. So it's a different kind of resource, and I think that is where the challenge is, and it makes this this whole discipline and the area very challenging, and it needs proper protection and responsible management. So now I'm going to see how, on what I'm trying to say, how does the program of citizenship, how does one look at it, and how does one pick up from the Constitution to some understanding of what the needs of heritage are, to put it together and make some activities and programs. That is what I'm attempting to do here. Then, protection has been limited to the monuments protected under the ASI or the state acts. And of course there are many lists. INTAC has also made many lists of many places and cities, and I know, and I also remember the recent mapping exercise that was attempted last year with the architecture students of Chennai, and but it has a long way to go to become a useful tool for city management, where all the different kind of stakeholders can somehow find a role to work for the task of management, responsible management of heritage. So that is that is something that we need to look at, and also see how it can be enhanced, and how to go about it. And of course there are other people who need to do all that part, but I think as far as INTAC, they can, they are doing the uh, citizenship programs, and you have schools of architecture represented and professionals represented who can also chip in with their skills, so to and so sort of to evolve, and to work together, on in this area. You will all agree there is a lot. May citizenship, you know, training may help to complete maybe this. I was just thinking, for what we have done in Chennai, can some programs like this be brought about, planned by some of us for Chennai, and will it be able to actually complete the task of this of getting of actually generating a comprehensive database that is available to the community and all the citizens, so that it is approachable. I mean, it is available, so that all these programs do need to take information from this. That is important. And now there is another point that has to come, which I think has not been mentioned in the scope of this of the all the brochures. This is the what is the World Heritage Convention of '72. World Heritage of UNESCO, and which brought about the inscription of World Heritage sites. In World Heritage sites, this convention and other conventions that followed have to be complied with. For example, Mahabalipuram is a World Heritage site, in Tamil Nadu. This again brings new responsibilities to citizens, and there is the issue of sovereignty and integrity of the country, and that means the interface between the UNESCO and the nation and the state party, or the national framework, that has to be worked out and interfaced very well, so that there is this so that what has been said is that constitution is important and it is a focus. I think it has to be extended so that this integration also goes to the international level, and because all the monuments and whatever heritage, it is on the ground, and it is already on the ground, and it is very complex to actually handle this, because there are so many issues and problems and personalities and agencies involved in that. So that is why these programs have to be very carefully formulated. But what I'm now saying is, why not take it to this, actually interfacing it with the international, which will help, because there's a lot of wrong information that is going to the World Heritage sites, and I can say that in Hampi there was a lot of wrong information that was a problem, and so that having citizens who are informed might help in this. Now, so actually what has happened is, this has introduced another dimension to in this whole in this focus of heritage and citizenship, and it is up to you to discuss this and think about it. And and of course, and the relationship is between UNESCO, national framework, and the ground. Because even the country's sovereignty cannot be lost. So what is UNESCO? You can say certain things, but they can't say everything. So it's a very delicate kind of delicate balance that is here, and it needs people who are very well informed for that. Now, the scope of heritage has broadened over the years, and today we recognize water structures. I think the water systems is what one of our one of our presenters are going to talk about. Historical cities have also come into the is seen as another category of cultural resource, and these have numerous components within them. So it is not a single building anymore, and also these buildings are live buildings where people will be living, and so it is. So again, it becomes more whatever more relevant for citizenship kind of thing. But it is, but I think it is not. It is another challenge that is there, which needs to be addressed and seen how programs can be formulated, and and then of course cultural landscapes. These are definitions, the scope that has been broadened by UNESCO. Actually, today you have all kinds of buildings, industrial heritage. You have World Heritage sites. You have modern architecture, for instance. Chandigarh is part of World Heritage sites. Historic cities, we have both Ahmedabad and Jaipur, which are World Heritage sites. And then we have what is called Indian cultural landscape. I call this Indian cultural landscape, and I think this is quite distinct from the definition of what UNESCO has put in its whatever they, in the internet, because India has always looked at its landscape as a cultural landscape from time immemorial, and this truth about Indian cultural landscape today, with the kind of planning that goes on, we are losing a lot of heritage and large areas of the landscape, and I think that has to be addressed with, and so I am defining this as Indian cultural landscape. I'll just give you a few examples. The Kailasha mountain top. I mean, everyone knows about it. It's known from human beings. I mean, we all know about it. So it is a very cultural area, okay? And it is, fortunately, maybe it is too far, or so it is not, it may be saved. It's not saved. Apparently, the ice is melting there too because of climate change. But just to give you some examples of Indian kind of, different kinds of land, whatever sites that are there, natural, but these are cultural sites, not natural, because they mix both, because it has a lot of meaning, human meaning from human beings. The Tungabhadra river, part of the World Heritage Site of Hampi, is also a cultural area. It is the whole valley is a cultural area. It is to be seen as a cultural, from the cultural perspective, and it is a cultural product. And of course, it consists of a natural river, but the way the whole development has been and everything, the whole history of it, and the way what has happened over time, it makes it a very meaningful cultural area. A settlement like Vrindavan, it is again, it is a region, sacred, is a cultural sacred region of India, and it is following the same philosophy of what I call the Indian cultural landscape. And it is not a sacred landscape as that, as they have in the Western sense. It is very different, and it is very live, and all kinds of other cultural products. And Ahmedabad wall sitting, I think we have someone who will be talking about planning, and I think that is so there will be some more inputs on about what a World Heritage City and heritage, and what is the role of citizenship and the nature of citizenship programs. So there is a lot of learning that is required. For this, well, I can tell you, when I started working in the school, in the department, I had to learn conservation and then teach it also. I was trained all right, but still I did not know enough of the world around me, like all architects who have been taught in a different way. So I had to learn first and then learn how to teach that. So that was the process that I had to follow. So I think that there is a lot of learning also required for the trainers about the heritage to conduct, and about the heritage framework, and to formulate and conduct training of citizenship programs with the redefined. Otherwise, one is just following some formulas, and you have some training programs that are supposed to be done. Should not be like this. I think the training programs should be addressing the real world of conservation of India and the real world of heritage of India. So that it's all very precise and very clear, and it is and you're really, and you are training people specifically for our context. With the redefined scope of heritage resources, the numbers become infinite, leading to the need of new ways of processing and cultural, uh, of the cultural resource information. You understand that the moment we increase the scope of heritage, or we take more into the list that we have, the whole thing sort of starts expanding. And in order to make that meaningful, it has to go through it has to be, and useful, it has to go through a lot of processing. And I think this kind of processing can also be used as a for citizenship training, for that, because it is a kind of data that is there, and we can and it will also look at the same historical area in a site in a different way. Information requirements for upkeep and management of complex heritage requires heritage sites requires very high information level to enable all of us who want to work on it, including the ones who want to make citizenship training, for us to be able to work there. And I think but anyway, I think the whole the way to understand India's heritage is that it is a source of knowledge, and it is an inspiration, and it also contains the entire composite culture and diversity with its numerous numerous evidences on itself. It is there standing, and it needs to be safeguarded. And so you find that it itself is your subject for learning, and it has a lot of scope for different kinds of work, kinds of programs. And I personally, I think one point I have to make is, I don't think we can say, what is it called, listing, and I'm talking about inventories. I am, for instance, if you're talking about Chennai, I think to an extent one should have an idea how many, what should be the inventory and what should be the number of, items that will be there, that will start reading about and telling you and talking to you about, Chennai, Madras's heritage. Okay, so it has to be, and all this information has to be in the public realm, to empower citizens and to take responsibility of their surroundings. How does the heritage learning link to the Constitution? The articles, the directives, and the schedules, it shows the way and informs us of the entire. Actually, if by going through it carefully, you will actually get the entire process of protection and responsible management of all kinds of cultural resources, both tangible and intangible, and knowledge systems can be worked out through this document, provided we apply ourselves to it. But I think, but what I will highlight a few points before I end. I think what is most important is, now, I think the area of ethics and responsibilities. Ethics is very important, and what are the responsibilities towards the kind of heritage I have told you about right now, and I've just very broadly mentioned, but when it is a starting point for responsible citizenship in the context of India. The root, that is, I have one point I would like to disagree with all of you here. I don't think awareness is enough. I think you should push that boundary to what is called knowledge. That is what you give to the people who come for your training programs. If you do that, what happens is you actually you are actually creating a responsible citizen, and certainly a kind of citizen who knows how to work within his or her environment, especially when new buildings have to come up. So instead of the kind of things that go on, but somehow a better quality of knowledge through some programs can help the responsible, will empower the citizens to be responsible and know how to act to better their city. Okay, that's so anyway, I think that's about I want to talk to you. And but I just and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Now that it looks there is a lot of exciting webinar planned for all of you, so that will be the next one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nalini, for such an interesting and insightful talk. Really, really thank you so much. Dr. Sugato Dutt needs to go for an urgent meeting, so we are just requesting him to speak now. It is my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Sugato Dutt. Dr. Sugato Dutt is an officer in the Indian Forest Service of the Tamil Nadu cadre. In a career spanning some 35 years, he has handled various assignments, including wildlife conservation, agroforestry, and public outreach in forest management. The range of organizations with which he has worked included the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the USIAD, the Center for International Forestry Research, Bogor, Indonesia, as well as the central and state governments in India. He obtained a doctoral degree in human geography, researching the impact of wildlife management provisions on livelihood opportunities for local communities at the Baksa Tiger Reserve in North Bengal. He also worked on developing the protected area management systems of Bangladesh as a fellow of the East-West Center, Honolulu, Hawaii, in the United States. His recent assignments include policy analysis and management in biodiversity conservation in Tamil Nadu state. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer, Compensatory Afforestation Program of Tamil Nadu. Over to Dr. Sugato Dutt.
Thank you so much, Deepika. I hope I'm audible and.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's quite an honor to be amongst art historians, connoisseurs of culture, and historians as in general. Because I would probably be taking you to our natural heritage, and I would have a few thoughts to share on the precarious condition of one particular species, namely Santalum album, as it's called technically, or I'm talking, of course, of the well-known sandalwood or chandan, which has been pretty much a part of our extended heritage, not only within our country, but interestingly enough, we share a lot of cultural practices with China as well. And China, the Chinese traditions have actually sort of reinforced themselves over the years with the growing affluence in that country, and have upset the trade balance and thereby impacted the conservation of Santalum album. So just to outline my talk, if I could go over to the next slide, please. I would speak, can I have the next slide? Thank you. I would talk a little bit about the tree itself, and then, of course, our combined heritage in terms of what we use as various condiments, oil, powder, paste, and also a rich variety of wood carvings. I will dwell a little bit on the colonial management practices of forestry in general, and sandalwood in particular. And from there on, I'll tell how the global trade in sandalwood has resulted in a crisis in conservation of that particular species. And at the end, I'll look a little bit on the future and what it means for sandalwood within both our country and the rest of the world. Next slide, please. We have the next slide. Yeah. The tree itself is slender. It's really not very tall. Very tall trees themselves barely reach over 20 feet in height. It has lovely small drooping branchlets. And what's really significant in this tree is what we call the heartwood. It's light brown in color, and that is what gives the fragrant flavor of the wood. There is a very high percentage of sandalwood oil that actually is responsible for all the qualities of the wood. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. We do need to understand a little bit of this plant's physiology. This is something that grows typically in the peninsular part of the country. It prefers red soils, and it really doesn't like shade too much. It flourishes well in open space, and it does have a fairly long dormancy. But what's really significant, and something that people do not really know, is that this is actually a parasite in its younger stage of life. This is technically a root parasite, and what it does mean is young saplings of sandalwood, after they germinate, would be dependent on a host species and to draw their nutrition from, and cannot really be expected to survive if we fail to provide a host species. So, and it's also affected by a viral disease. We call it the sandalwood spike disease. And that has been actually responsible, as you can see, for wiping out large populations of these, both within Tamil Nadu state as well as Karnataka. If I can have the next slide and go over to, thank you. A few words about the oil itself. The way it's actually obtained is through a process of steam distillation. You can see a classic picture of an old style distillation unit. And we need to sort of chip the wood down into small particles and have it steam distilled. And during that process, we get the oil come out. As you probably will all know, it's that oil which is widely used in the perfumery industry. I mean, the heart of which in India lies in a city called Kannauj in Uttar Pradesh. And incidentally, we do have a variety of synthetic substitutes getting into the market, and that too has significance, if you will, in terms of how the wood would be used in the coming years in time. Next slide, please. Yeah, and we know sandalwood particularly for its the quality of its wood, which allows a phenomenal range of carving to be done. And as you can see, I mean, there's a variety of products that have been experimented with, both within our country and in fact, in China as well, have all been carved out of this very brilliant quality of the wood, which allows not only sandalwood to be appreciated for its fragrance, but also its carving qualities. So that's really what's happening. That's actually been responsible, if you will, for the threat to the species and the phenomenal rise in the global trade as well. Next slide, please. Yeah. Sandalwood carving does have a strong base in southern India that comes, of course, from the culture of wood carvings within the temples themselves, particularly the rathas or vehicles. But they typically use a different quality of wood. There's a variety of hardwoods, much darker than sandal itself. But surprisingly, the carving industry has made its niche in several parts of the country, including Rajasthan, where the tree really doesn't naturally grow very much. But I thought I'd share with you an example of tradition being passed from generation to generation. This is the Jangid family. This hails from Churu in Rajasthan. And they're now, of course, based more in Jaipur. And the paterfamilias of the family, Mr. Mohit Jangi, that has trained his sons, and through a very simple set of instruments, have been producing an outstanding range of carvings, as you can see, that have won several national awards and have also settled them into master craftsman positions in the global industry as well. If I could have the next slide, I'll go ahead very quickly. Uh, there is now a little bit to be said about the general distribution of the genus Santalum across the world. You might find it interesting that there are as many as 16 different species of sandalwood across the globe. And there is now a flourishing trade in Australia. In fact, this is a legacy of the trade beginning in the Pacific Islands, where a different set of species actually called the Santalum spicatum has been found to be located in the Fiji Islands, in Hawaii, and gradually got also established in Australia, Western Australia to be more precise. And there's fierce competition now in the global trade with products from the Pacific. The next slide. Thank you. The global trade has a variety of products. It's attar, perfumes, incense sticks, a wide range of handicrafts, and very, very interestingly, quite a range of soap and toiletry products. But what does stand out is the quality of the oil in the Indian species, which is very, very much appreciated globally. And a lot of the trade practices that we do have tried to even restrict the export of sandalwood logs and only allow the finished product, so that we could save the raw material from what now seems to be the threat of some degree of extinction as well. Now let's go ahead. Let's look a little bit at our colonial period, where sandalwood was declared something like a monopoly of the state. And that's largely because we had a huge amount of revenue being earned for the state by the sale of sandalwood. And even at the time of Tipu Sultan, the Mysore state, we had a lot of trade in sandalwood in exchange for arms and ammunitions. And Tipu Sultan, went ahead and called it something like the royal tree, not allowing commoners to fell it at all. And he happened to store it into his forts. In fact, there is a wide range of sandalwood kotis in today's in Karnataka today, and that heritage comes in from Tipu Sultan himself. Succeeding Tipu was the Wadiyar dynasty, and of course it acceded, control to the British and allowed a little more open trade, and that escalated the scale of export of sandalwood. There was also the emerging Chinese market right at that point in time in history. And the attraction of the Chinese for this particular product encouraged the British to extract a lot more sandalwood from the forests of India. And that really was the beginning of the decline of this species. There have been a lot of threats to sandalwood, as you can see, aside from just the trade factor. There's been recurrent fires in the forests. There's been, invasive species competing with the native sandalwood. And of course, the spike disease that I spoke of. So much so, and this peculiar picture does reveal that when sandalwood is found as growing as a tree in even the urban environment, extreme caution needs to be taken to prevent its being stolen. And you can see that picture on the bottom left of a well-known research institute in Bangalore, where not only is there a wall of the compound, the height of which has been increased, but it's been fenced off individually as well to make sure. But unfortunately, even trees that have been guarded so vigorously have been found to be cut and stolen in recent times. The next slide. Mysore has a phenomenal legacy of sandalwood products. The first sandal oil factory was established by the then Maharaja all the way back in the early 1900s. And then, of course, there's this range of products that we've all known. They've almost become household names: Mysore sandal soap and Mysore sandal talc. I regret to tell you that this is now in a state of decline. And this is from a peak period all the way back in the 1970s, where we counted something like about 85,000 trees of sandalwood in Mysore alone. That's the district. And they yielded something like 20,000 kgs of wood annually. Let's go ahead. Can I have? Thank you. There are, of course, a lot of smaller craftsmen that are associated, and the government of Karnataka stepped in to ration the supply of sandalwood to them. And as you can see, the products are much simpler than the Jangir family produced back in Rajasthan. But amazingly enough, even this rationing was insufficient, and very, very gradually we find that the Gudigars, that is the community that does the traditional wood carving, are struggling for their livelihoods, and a lot of younger folk are now leaving that trade for better options elsewhere. Along with this decline, we see now a threat to several religious and cultural practices. They're getting co-endangered, so to speak. Very rarely do we have the luxury, if you will, to cremate our beloved departed with sandalwood. We are losing the practice of applying sandalwood on our foreheads in religious practice. We also, I suppose, losing the traditional use of attar in northern India. At least not, we don't have it anymore on the scale in which we were familiar in the past. So this is a little bit about how commerce and industry are also interfering. The scale of commerce and is interfering with the status of the tree species. Next, please. So again, just a glimpse of the past, where a picture postcard, not a picture postcard, a postcard was actually advertising for the sale of sandalwood oil. This is way back, I think, in 1930, if I'm not mistaken. I can have the next slides. It's just a few. Yeah, that the colonial here, it's been put into these coties, but the effort to increase productivity of the species back in the natural forests has been blocked because we could not find successful ways of, allowing natural regeneration, and the spike disease took a big toll. And right between the two world wars, I think there was a phenomenal excess of extraction of sandalwood. And so very gradually, the world began to shift its source of sandalwood over to, believe it or not, Australia. Can we have the next slide? The Pacific Island trade, I mean, this was again declared as a royal tree, just like Tipu Sultan did in the Pacific Islands. The then native kings there also declared it as a royal tree. And as you can see in this peculiar picture on the left, individuals would go to any length to cut down the timber and store it in pits on the ground. And the size of the pits was equivalent to the capacity of the ships in which they were loaded into. So when the pit would get filled up, it would then get carried over to the shipyard. As you can see, the huge volumes of sandalwood that were extracted in the Pacific Islands. So much so that the trade completely got exhausted by 1830 itself. It was over-harvest, over-exploitation, and that was the end of sandalwood production in the Pacific Islands. The trade gradually had to move to Australia. Next one, please. There is the Chinese connection that began by the late 17th century. and then sandalwood got decimated. In post-independence India, we had a hard time, as I already mentioned, in regenerating sandalwood. And now, with the growing affluence in China, it's actually the Australians that have been able to, take over the trade, not only trade, but also the cultural. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Australians have used a lot of modern technology as pictures. The industry is the Australians, and they have begun in a very, very large scale to be able to grow this species. Uh, I have a last slide, I think, if I could go over to that. The trade in India still remains state-owned. So even if you grow sandalwood on your private compounds, you do need a huge series of permissions to be able to A, fell it, and then B, sell it. So private growers are still remain very badly disincentivized. However, there is a trade still in oil, soaps, powder that does continue. But I think if we run out of stock in this fashion, we really will not be able to prolong our own cosmetics and slide. Have the last slide, please.
There seems to be a delay in Sri Sugato's presentation. Malavika and Deepika, would you like to?
So sir has yet to finish his presentation. Should I go on to the next speaker?
Yeah, I guess we can. Did he have some issues with the network?
Okay, can we call upon Purnima then?
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Can we call upon Purnima, Principal and Director of Intact Delhi Hex, to give the program orientation?
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, okay. So I'm actually going to start at the very beginning. You know, we are from the Intact Heritage Education and Communication Service. Myself, Shiva, Abhishek, Christina, Sanjoli, and Gitika. And this is, one of the programs we are committed to. Now, heritage education is what we say is it brings out you know brings out a dimension of a right for a child, because a right to knowing about heritage is a part of good education for children. On the other hand, if we take the other side of it, it is also a responsibility for each one of us. So a few years ago, we started this program on heritage and good citizenship. And looking at heritage is not only the responsibility of young people, it's a responsibility for all of us. And this initiative, when it started, we got an excellent response from our chapters. So currently, we have covered Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra, Telangana, and Madhya Pradesh. And this year, we are covering Tamil Nadu. So, heritage is, according to our chairperson, what he said was, General Gupta, is heritage is anything that means something to us. It is something that touches us, it tells us something and makes us remember something. It has beauty, it has glorification, and it has significance. Heritage is everyone's story. Heritage is a legacy. Heritage belongs to me. Heritage belongs to all of us. Heritage could be a property, it could be inherited, it can be valued things such as a historic building that has been passed down from previous generations. It could be relating to things of historic or cultural value that are worthy of preservation. It's uh, it's our inheritance, and it is the keystone to our Indian culture, to our society, to our politics. It's basically the way we are, how we think, and what we do. And without this keystone, we are lost in our petty squabbles, which is what we are noticing today. And our love and concern for heritage, both tangible and intangible, is actually biting the dust. We have to look at heritage as a responsibility for all of us. And at the very start of heritage is what Sir Shed, Mr. Sugato Dutt, is sandalwood. It is our natural heritage. You know, the starting point is the legacy of our natural objects. So whether it's areas that have ecological and biological significance, or it is areas of cultural significance like our sacred groves and water bodies, or it is areas which have significant natural habitats for in situ conservation of biological diversity, having species which have outstanding universal value. All these are part of our natural heritage. If we look at India as a country may not be the most significant on the planet today, but there is something unique about us. India is a civilization of many images. India is a civilization of many visual feasts. It's a country where what is visible and palpable is as important as what is oral and occurrent. So if our landscape is a three-dimensional landscape, our stories and our traditions are the fourth dimension, which is added on by our culture. It's a dimension which makes our country so different, because we have so much of intangible heritage which is connected with our natural features. So whether I take the Kaveri River, whether I take the Ganga, whether I take the antecedent rivers which are to the north of the Himalayas, or whether I take the Himalayas themselves, there is so much of tradition connected to what it is. In fact, what I'm going to hold here is an ammonite. Is this visible to all of you all? What is here? It's an ammonite. An ammonite in traditional terms is referred to, as a shaligram. Now, when we refer to it as a shaligram, it is a tradition we are attaching to a natural object. So, what exactly is an ammonite? An ammonite is a marine fossil which goes back to close to 400 million years. So, what makes this marine fossil very special? This marine fossil becomes very special because it carries the story of the origin of the Himalayas. But what it is also trying to bring out is the fact that our natural heritage, is woven with so many traditions and with so many stories. So if I were to take our country and its geo heritage, which needs to be protected, if I travel from Bangalore to Jammu, I actually cover 3 billion years of the Earth's history, and that's what makes our country so unique, because we not only have the oldest landforms of the world, but we also have the youngest. And if we take our trees, if we take our water bodies, they all have so many dimensions to it which are unique. Our built heritage is buildings or structures which have historic value, which have socio-cultural value, striking architectural or artistic significance. They play an important role in the history of the region. In the selection of heritage structures and buildings of value, it could be aesthetic, architectural value, environmental value, functional value, or it is an important cultural resource, historical, associative, economic, and commercial. So whether we take the Sanchi Stupa, which is in Madhya Pradesh, which brings out the first, dome or what is called Anda, or if we take our temples in the south, like your Dravidian style temples, or you could take the Visara style temples, or we take the medieval architecture, or even the modern architecture of Chennai, which is your Fort St. George. Each one of them have have the right to be protected, and we really need to look upon ourselves as, are we doing enough for our buildings? Are we doing enough for what is unprotected? And as Nalini ji shared, are we doing enough for the cultural landscapes which surround our architecture? If we take the third dimension of heritage, it is art objects, artifacts, paintings, manuscripts, textiles, and photographs, all of which have historic value. It could be a heritage value, could be aesthetic, could be architectural value, functional value, cultural resource, historical associative, or also the economic and commercial, as was clearly shared by you with you by Mr. Dutt. I'm just going to touch upon one kind of material and heritage, which is a heritage of our paintings. If we look at the cave paintings, or we look at the Patachitra of Orissa, or your Tanka paintings of Ladakh or Sikkim, or even the storytellers' paintings, or the miniature, or Raja Ravi Verma, Jamini Roy, or our film posters, each one of them have a dimension to add to our heritage, and are worthy of being conserved and taken care of. And finally, we come to living heritage, which is the intangible heritage associated with practices, skills, and knowledge of people, including languages, customs, and performing arts. I'll just share these beautiful, lines by Harsha Dedeja. Is the potter's wheel, the needle of the embroider, the mold of the textile block printer, the brush of the kalamkari maker, the chisel of the sculptor, the kalam of the calligrapher, the spindle of the weaver. These are just basic tools of Akriti, but they are a testament to our Indian creativity. In them resides knowledge and ancient memory, a beautiful energy in them are bodily rhythms of trackless generations. From their movement will arise metaphors and motives which are passed down from mother to daughter. And above all, in these hands is the living and pulsating desire to create a beautiful Akriti. So this is weaving our material heritage and our living heritage. It is this, tradition which is passed on from, one generation to another, which makes it very special and very unique. In this slide, I'm just bringing out, the intangible heritage of, dance forms in India. So we had looked at the first dimension of what is exactly heritage and what are the four dimensions of heritage, whether it was natural, whether it was your built material or intangible. Now if we look at the other side of it, citizenship. Citizenship is something which is maybe a concept to us, but what it is very important to understand is this is a part of our democratic setup. This is a part of what makes us what we are. Aristotle described the citizen as one who has a share in both ruling and being ruled, and throughout history citizenship has maintained strong ethical links to justice, to democracy, to liberty, and to debate about what a person's conduct should be in society. What is the notion of a good citizen? And in today's world, citizenship is the citizen who is connected with the political process, with the economic process, and the economic ability of a country. Also, there should be no social exclusion, and we need to understand that multiple identities make India what we are, and that redefines our Indianness. And the two things which actually, the two V's which actually go together for good citizenship is voting and also volunteering. So that's the very reason or the premise for us to do this program, is for us to understand that at Intact we really need a lot of support from young people and from citizens to contribute to the protection of our heritage. We have to look upon ourselves as members of a society and a nation. Citizenship participation is what is the key component to effective functioning of our democracy. I've got the preamble here, and I actually have a copy of the actual constitution. So this is a reproduction or a copy of the constitution. And looking at this, it actually makes you realize that there was just so much of effort which went on to produce the constitution. It is a document which is worthy of our respect, and this document is also worthy of our contributions as as a citizen. And this preamble had the fundamental rights, and the fundamental duties were added later, and so were, the two other points which are here, which is socialist and secular. And if we take the symbols of our citizenship, the symbols we are all familiar with, but the one which I really want to emphasize on is, the charkha. The charkha is what, was our symbol of freedom. If we take the lion capital, that again is very important for us. And the Brahmo Samaj hymn by Tagore, which later became our, national anthem. Taking the charkha, I would like to share the lines by Guru Nanak, which said that compassion be the cotton, contentment the thread, modesty the knot, and truth the twist. This is the sacred thread of the soul. If you have this thread, then go ahead and tie it on me. And these are all the points of what exemplifies a good citizen. Our national symbols are the tree, it's the tiger, it's the peacock, the lotus, it is the river Ganga, and it is even the fruit, the mango. In fact, very interesting, I was reading today, is the word mango is derived from the Tamil word, I think, mankani, which means mango. And each one of them, of our symbols, have so much of so much of story to them, have so many interesting dimensions to them. The pride for our country is our landscapes, which are so very diverse, our monuments, like the Taj Mahal, the games we play, or our mathematics, which makes us very unique, or even the story of milk, which is the Amul story, or the story of metallurgy, or even the story which weave into our films, and finally the story of harmony. That is just a few little nuggets of our pride in India. These are all the fundamental rights, and in schools, children are very familiar with fundamental rights. But our fundamental duties, the three of them which are directly associated with heritage, are 51AF, 51AG, and 51AI. 51AF is to value and preserve the rich heritage of a composite culture. G is to protect and improve the natural environment. And the I is to safeguard public property and to abjure violence. But the one before that and the one between that is also heritage. The one before that is to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood. And the other one, which is very special, is to develop scientific temper and humanism. So, out of our 11 fundamental duties, 5 of them clearly bring out, the dimensions of heritage. So when we take heritage and when we take citizenship, they are actually both interlinked. So I was told many a time is, why are you taking heritage as a part of citizenship? But there is no way that you can, separate heritage from citizenship, because they are both woven to create our, our identity. Both enhance each other and are mutually interlinked. Therefore, we cannot think of citizenship without heritage. And that is the very reason why we started, citizenship training as a part of, heritage education. And why should citizens protect heritage? Because it links one to the past and helps us to nurture heritage for future generations. It contributes to, the well-being of what we are. It enhances the quality of our life. It also gives your economic support. It encourages infrastructure development, and it strengthens our, community ties. And that is the very reason why, as citizens, we should consider protecting heritage as one of our key, areas. And teaching and learning through citizenship helps heritage, because it helps us to value mutual understanding, respect, and tolerance. It helps us to support creative dialogue, develop faith in democratic ideas and social settings, develop social unity, and promote individual responsibilities. These seem to us like just, words, but, each word, if we seep it into ourselves, then we will realize that every good citizen in our country is one who, is proud, and one who stands up for their heritage, whether preventing a building coming down. Like, for example, in Patna, just yesterday, there was an issue of a statement that, the high court building would not be brought down, and for that, intac had put in a lot of, effort. And I'll go back to it, is how do I contribute to heritage as a good citizen? I could be a part of making an inventory, which again, Nalini ji shared. I can restore and use community buildings, facilitate action for providing legal protection to heritage assets, undertake watchdog activities to detect cases where cultural heritage may be at risk, mobilizing of public opinion, networking with school, colleges, universities, participating in activities which are sponsored or organized by the government, network with the societies, like-minded societies, with professional bodies, museums, promote public-private partnership, and establishing a heritage cell in, in every local body, which is for enforcement of heritage regulations, protection and restoration of, cultural heritage. So with this, premise, I finally come to what we say is a pledge, which those who have joined us, from schools, this is a very simple pledge which each child should, undertake, that as a responsible citizen, I care for the wonders of nature that are mine to protect. I'm proud of the richness of culture and heritage that I promise to respect. I pledge to conserve and preserve the heritage of our country, and I will endeavor to save, protect, and promote the heritage of India, which is our national wealth. So taking all of this, we are undertaking these citizenship training workshops, and I really thank, the innovative manner in which the Chennai chapter has, taken it up. They have really put in a lot of effort, and they have reached out to so many of you all, and they have done an excellent job in, promoting heritage education and in promoting citizenship. So I really thank each one of you all in the Chennai chapter, and I look forward to supporting you all in all your initiatives. So thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you. I will end and I will hand over to Malvika and Deepika. I think you'll have to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Soumya. I thought, okay. Sorry. Sorry.
Would I request Soumya to introduce Dr. Rani Vedamuthu?
Dr. Rani Vedamuthu is the professor and dean of School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University, where she completed her master's in architecture and PhD. She has a sea of experience in teaching and research and professional practice. She is a part of the academic boards of many universities and also the Board of Governors, School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. She is a nominee of the Government of Tamil Nadu to the Council of Architecture. She is here to share with us the importance of citizenship for faculty. I request Dr. Rani Vedamuthu to take over the session.
Thank you, Soumya. Can you can you hear me? Thank you, Soumya, and a very good morning to everyone present over here. It's actually a very great pleasure to see some of the speakers for this particular webinar. We have Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan, Srivatsan, Sugato Dutt, and of course Purnima and Nalini Thakur, the presenters of this workshop. So at the outset, I would first like to place my appreciation on record to INTAC and architect Sujata, Shankar the convener, Deepika, and others at INTAC for involving us at the School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University, to collaborate in this Jago Heritage and Citizenship initiative and webinar on the theme Conservation of Natural and Built Heritage. It is well known that natural and cultural heritage is a shared resource and forms part of the cultural identity of places, communities, and individuals. We Indians need to be proud of our vast and varied cultural heritage, which is highly valued the world over and which has actually set us apart, something which Dr. Nalini Thakur mentioned this morning. And because of its uniqueness, we are actually kind of set apart. It is our right and duty as citizens of our country to be aware of this rich and varied heritage, to be able to appreciate the natural and cultural diversity of our country, and to actively engage ourselves in its conservation for future generations. The word Jago, which actually literally means rise and shine, or what I can say more appropriately is get up, get aware, and care. It is an excellent participatory initiative towards heritage conservation by the INTAC Heritage Education and Communication Services, an institution designed to promote heritage awareness to the citizens of the country. This has been done by engaging various citizens groups through targeted and themed heritage and citizenship training workshops. And today's scenarios, we have this webinar put together. INTAC has been able to reach out to a lot of schools through their heritage clubs and to higher education institutions like ours through training and workshops targeted at training the trainers. A number of faculty have benefited from this initiative through not only the heritage and citizenship training workshops, but also faculty development programs, the objective being to create ambassadors of heritage and conservation. We at the School of Architecture and Planning were involved with the INTAC in conducting a FDP, a faculty development program, which not only aimed at faculty, but also involved the engineers in the PWD, under whose department much of our built heritage is managed. As the institutional partners of Intact Chennai chapter, the School of Architecture and Planning were indeed fortunate to have two of our faculty members, Ms. Rajeshwari Ravi and Ms. Asha Rema, they are with us today in the webinar, participate in the Heritage and Citizenship Training Workshop conducted at Coimbatore to launch the Jago initiative in the southern chapters of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Pondicherry. Though it was largely attended by members of the different zones of Intact in the south, with the objective to train them to initiate teachers and to conduct citizens workshops in their zones, the inclusion of teaching faculty in the program was to initiate teachers into the conduct of such programs within their institutions and to disseminate the importance of natural and cultural heritage and identity. So reaching out to institutions of learning is actually all about reaching out to the younger generations. I heard that Jago workshop, which was attended by two of our faculty members, had some very engaging and interactive sessions besides hands-on training. And I'm sure we will hear both from Rajeshwari as well as Asha about their experience at such a workshop. As an institution, to create this awareness, we have very recently introduced an elective course called Understanding Chennai to familiarize our students with all the stories and narratives that make up our city, that speak of its people and its culture, the events, its architecture, and planning developments. Okay, so I'm very happy to actually see Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan here, is because this course is being handled by me. And the starting of this course, actually, I introduced the whole course by talking about the ecology of Chennai. So I'm sure Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan, an encyclopedia about the city of Chennai and its ecology, will definitely have a great impact on the students. Of course, Srivatsan is going to talk on the planning of the city and its heritage. So it's quite nice because I see many of my students. I have a class of 28. I think most of them are here participating in this workshop. So it is one way that this workshop has got right across to the younger generation. Now, to just conclude or give a few concluding remarks, to conserve and spread awareness of our heritage, we need the engagement of new audiences and continued development of more participatory models of interpretation and governance, with increased involvement of both the private sector and civil society. Citizenship and heritage education should be aimed at promoting active participation and the transformation of society. I'm sure that the conduct of such programs, participants will come to understand the role of heritage as a symbolic identity and identity source that facilitates the understanding of the present and past, highlighting the value of teaching. So thank you, Sujata, and thank you, Intact, for giving me this opportunity to speak a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rani Vedamuthu. I'd like to go next and explain my experience at the Citizenship Workshop. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Deepika Anand, Intact member from the Chennai chapter. It was my honor and privilege to attend the Citizenship and Heritage Workshop held in Coimbatore earlier this year. The content of the very well-designed workshop was focused, effective, and the takeaways were many. The main goal of the workshop was to create heritage awareness, preservation, and developing an understanding of the interconnection between good citizenship and heritage. As a part of the workshop, keynote speakers provided valuable insights on how local heritage sites and water bodies were restored with the help of citizen involvement and the enforcement of heritage regulations. We participated in museum visits and learned about heritage issues at local, regional, and national levels. It was an extremely rewarding experience, and I'm inspired by the work done by Heritage Education Communications Services Division of Intact Delhi, run by a great team that includes Purnima Dutt, Shiva Rawat, and Christine, who organized this workshop. It was a pleasure to meet and interact with all the co-members from other chapters, as well as the faculty from SAP. I am very proud to be part of the Intact family and will strive to continue to protect, preserve, and restore our tangible and intangible heritage and bring about its awareness among my fellow citizens. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I now introduce Rajeshwari Ravi, faculty from the School of Planning and Architecture, Chennai, my co-participant in the workshop, to give her experience at the workshop. Over to Rajeshwari.
Thank you, Deepika. And very good morning to all of you. I'm Rajeshwari, School of Architecture and Planning, and I've been teaching here at the Department of Architecture for about 11 years now. And it's a great pleasure to be here today and to be able to share my experience from attending the Heritage and Citizenship Training Workshop at Coimbatore. It was indeed a unique experience. And I think what set it apart was the fact that a lot of the speakers and the participants were all conveners and senior members of the Intact chapters from Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And they brought with them a great deal of enthusiasm and energy gained from years of working on the ground with the community, with the government, and they were able to share their stories of how they overcame all these challenges with great deal of passion. And I think I'll also take this opportunity to thank Ms. Purnima Dutt, who coordinated the workshop. She did an outstanding job of making it so interactive. So we were all able to connect with each other and with the topic of heritage conservation, and made a great deal of friends in the 2 days, and were able to share stories and experience that wouldn't have been possible in any other setting. So thank you, Purnima, and thank you, Intact, for the great experience. Now I'd like to pass on the stage to Asha, who would like to add her experiences too.
Asha, I'm not able to hear you. Yeah, again, yeah. Yeah, I think you should be good. Can you please stop? Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, we can.
Very warm good morning. To start, when I just went for the workshop, I really didn't had didn't know how it is going to be. But when I went there and I saw different people's different backgrounds who had hands-on work on specialized. They were the conveners from different states, and their views and ideas were very different. And we really had all the sessions were very interactive, and we were made to first introduce ourselves, and we were very all the ice-breaking sessions and everything. We were able to interact with others and do. And among that, and I liked one of the workshop very much, where we first involved ourselves to do a small workshop on idea we were asked to take a small topic on community issues or any heritage based development. We were asked to take a topic, and we were asked, we were made into a small groups where we just bring out our ideas. So what was the issues about, how we can take it further, a small action plan for the problem which we sort of. So where I realized the point was when we people of different categories sat together and we just bring out the points, it was very different. like everybody has a different views from the what solutions can be, what can be the government side problems can occur, how we can tackle. There were different solutions and problems, everything was brought out. So I think like when we bring citizens together, we have a different insight. So I think that was the main essence that which Intact was trying to tell us the entire event. So when the citizens of come together, we have different views on things. So we can bring out different ideas and solutions. So this actually made us understand that we as a citizens are responsible and we can think in a different way. And when we are together, we can bring a lot of new ideas. So this, I think as citizens, we all should bring out different views. And I really was very thankful for the opportunity which I was really happy to be a part of the hands-on workshop. And the workshop actually made us understand that we acquire whatever knowledge we acquire is not, we should actually keep passing on to the next generation or next people. So only the passing on the knowledge will keep us intact. So I really I really want to thank the Intact for giving me such an opportunity and making me to share my experience in the workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepika, Rajeshwari, and Asha. I now hand over the mic to Soumya. Soumya, could you please introduce Dr. A. Srivatsan?
Dr. A. Srivatsan is an architect and urban designer and currently the Executive Director, Center for Research on Architecture and Urbanism, CEPT University, Ahmedabad, where he previously was the Academic Director. He has taught earlier for a decade in Chennai and worked for about 8 years as a senior journalist with The Hindu. His research and writings include the themes of urban history and planning, contemporary practices, and architectural education. Srivatsan has recently co-edited the book titled The Contemporary Hindu Temple Fragments for a History. Now about the talk would focus on what it means to plan a city, what institutions and tools are involved, and what the challenges are in planning. The history of planning in Chennai will be traced, highlighting how historic areas and heritage have consistently been overlooked and why conservation efforts have not made a significant impact. The way forward is to understand that conservation and development are not in conflict and should be integrated as a useful strategy in planning. I request Dr. Srivatsan to take over.
Thank you, Intac and Sujata, for inviting me for this conversation. And thank you for all the participants who are here. I've slightly modified my structure because I assumed today the participants would be from different background. Some were already working, some curious to know what's happening. Some also doubtful whether this project is a possible project at all because we haven't seen very impressive results on ground. So what I've done is I've divided my presentation into 3 parts. First, I would like you to come with me on a virtual tour of Tamil Nadu. I would step out of Chennai and see the wide variety of heritage that we have. Apart from variety, I want to impress you on the scale of the problem, the complexity of the challenge, and above all, make a point that neither the state or 1 or 2 institutions can really engage with conservation. And actually, it's a time we have to decentralize and get a wide number of groups and citizens involved, because that is the nature of the problem. And that I hope to finish in 18 minutes. And then the second part, I want to lay out what are the institutions, what are the schemes on ground, and what are the key instruments are used for conservation, particularly at the city level, and finish my presentation with the case of Chennai, just to trace how plans after plans have overlooked the heritage areas. In particular, I want to take up Georgetown because it's coming for a huge redevelopment shortly. And that poses an immediate challenge for us who are interested in heritage. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. Is the screen visible to everyone? Okay, I am assuming it's visible to you. Just a second. Now, as I said, the first part, I want to focus on what the variety is, and I'm not really going to speak about each of these sites. If there's any detail that needs to be discussed, we can do it in the conversation time. This is Woodayalur. I saw there's like in this state about a few years ago, and which I hope it still exists like this. One of the beautiful villages laid according to certain principles of village planning. It qualifies to be a World Heritage Site as much as any other city. And so are the other traditional architecture, including the ones in the rural area. Of course, this kind of mansions we know of from the Chettinad, and we often talk about its value and heritage. But what we miss out are these great mansions in a number of cities, and these are from Madurai, including wonderfully done theaters. And there are other kinds of typologies of buildings, such as the chatrams of Tanjore. There are quite a few around Tanjore. It's got lovely interiors. And actually, when you draw it, you appreciate its great quality, architectural and the ornamental quality, which in its current state we'll not be able to appreciate given the way we look at the building and experience it. You walk into the Perambalur area, you would find the 10th to 13th century, around 13th century Buddha statues laying on the fields, unattended, precariously positioned. Or you could walk around the villages of Madurai and see the great Ayana statues done by the craftsmen who are also the priests. And this is from Pudukkottai, which has a great tradition of doing these clay gods made of clay. And we have wonderful streets, some of which are existing. For instance, the big bazaar in Kumbakonam, which was created during the Nayak period to integrate different temple nodes, which has some very interesting structures, which we imagine removing all those encroachments when we would see a grand bazaar there. We have also, not many as in North, but a few waterfronts, such as this in Tiruvayara. We also have a good number of historic cities. This is Srirangam, probably one of the few towns inside a temple, while you would normally see a temple inside a town, which has a unique structure of the 7 enclosures. And it's not just a city as an artifact, it's as a wonderful and a sensitive relationship to the landscape in which it sits. In this case, an island made by the river, Kaveri and its branch Kollinam. It's about 18 kilometers in length. And the 2 temples, Srirangam and Thiruvanaka, sit close to each other. It's a beautiful landscape, lush green, wonderful scenic and as well as cultural significance, and the temple towers over this. Sorry. Now, we have similar such temple towns like this one from Thiruvannamalai, which is basically a town designed for water collection. You could see the great Arunachaleswara mountain and the water bodies that are surrounding. And that's a very intimate relationship between the contours of the city, the watershed boundaries, and the way the city grows on one side and not all around, and very sensitive to the landscape, which I don't have to tell you, that's been lost. We also have interesting city shaped like a circle with a square inscribed in the center. This is Tanjore from the Nayak period. Same is the case of, while we know something about the Trichy rock fort, but it's very interestingly designed with a large rectangle in center is the rock, and there is a very dense residential area around the rock fort. But this is just a glimpse of what we have. But things don't remain as they are, and they do change, and it has to change. There's no question about it. But how do we handle change is the challenge. Okay? Because one shouldn't construct conservation as something which is against change. Conservation is essentially how do you manage change? How do you retain the values of what exists? How we add value to what exists? And how do we allow for change? And how sensitively we do both in respect to the past and as well as the present and future. Now, most often, the values of or the founding principles of a settlement is often ignored. Or in this case, Srirangam, if you see the Google image between 2002 and 2016, you see what was once a very ecologically sensitive island in which a very small settlement was conceptualized because of its subsequent proximity to Trichy, which became a major town. You could see the way in which the settlement is spreading at the cost of very fertile agricultural land. Okay. While some of the notion of heritage is now reduced to religious structures and religious principles and activities. The festival continues with the great splendor and pomp, and it should, for those who believe in it. But what happens in the city of Srirangam is, while focus is put on temple and festivals, the heritage of the town is lost. Even what normally one would consider as a very sacred precinct walls are now encroached and they're crumbling, and access to restore these walls are getting difficult. And some of the chatrams for this case in Nidamangala is more used as a grain granary and storage space. It's a lovely stucco work, very beautiful. And this is another glimpse of the Pudukkottai Palace. The old one, while the new one is more used as a collector's office. So no one begs attention. And some of these statues across the Perambolo, people in their own way have started protecting, but there are also very sad cases of the head being cut and stolen. This is the temple in use in the last few years, from where this Nataraja was stolen. And if you visit this temple, it's abandoned and uncared for, even by the local community. It's only when the Nataraja news idol hit the news, people woke to the fact that the temple was not safeguarded. Now, to me, the reason for taking you over is a wide variety of things that constitute heritage. As I told you, is to impress that most of our attentions and effort and also capacity is available in large cities where much has been lost, while what is still recoverable, where something is still possible, and where land values and land pressures are not so acute as it is in the case of Chennai, is where less attention has been paid. Okay? And I would come to in the end, I'll come to the reasons as to why this has happened. Now, let me take you through the systems of what's available for conservation. Now, we have all kinds of institutional arrangement for managing conservation. The ASI looks at monuments, the state archaeology looks at its structures, intact to its best of its abilities, is trying to focus on non-monumental temple boards and religious sentiments, however bad they are still have some custodians. and some planning agencies have heritage cell. What is missing are actually citizen groups. There's something to be learned from environmental activists and environmental groups. Environment has succeeded, or environmental activism has succeeded substantially because over many decades, the movement has been led by citizens, the people who are directly affected and also indirectly affected, have made substantial efforts. Impressive results have been gained, and today, despite many challenges, there's enough has been, I mean, if not enough, some impressive things have been achieved. But we don't see a similar thing in the case of heritage. And that's why I found the objective of this webinar essentially, hopefully, would lead to citizens' participation in some form or the other as a collective part of the state or part of INTAC or any such organizations, even individually. There are a few of which we really know less about in places like Trichy and so on, who do fantastic work, but there are more in terms of documentation and publication and so on. But on ground, protection of structures, working with the state to develop sensitive plans, that's really missing. There are many schemes that are currently available. The restoration projects by ASI continues to take of monuments. Of course, we have a National Monuments Authority established since 2012. Though it lists more than 75, we know only a fraction is under some kind of protection and restoration. We have INTAC driven, but INTAC is starved for funds. And really, for it to directly take projects are severely limited. And there are private projects, and that's something we must carefully look at and not dismiss it completely. For example, this project I saw in Tarangambadi, brought up by somebody. Of course, there is a danger of gentrification. Similarly, we have the TN Heritage City Planning schemes in 90s, which took off and died. We had the JNURM, which is a huge investment in city development, where there was focus on historic cities and courses. Even smart city projects that were started in 2014 had focus on heritage projects. Currently, the scheme which is in practice, or rather it just concluded, is the Heritage schemes, which is Heritage Redevelopment Yojana. It's fully funded by the center, which took a select cities and wherein a series of schemes were implemented for mixed results. And that sort of concluded a year or two ago. And of course, the new bus is the World Heritage Cities, where Ahmedabad and Jaipur are currently notified. But most of these attempts have been only partially successful. Okay. Part of it is because this is really top down. It finds a support for 3 years, 2 years, as long as the funds are coming and as long as there is a government interest, some of these projects are ongoing. But often once the scheme is over, it goes back to its original state. And second, you would notice probably that most of these are center schemes. There are hardly any state schemes, particularly not from Tamil Nadu, which has absolutely a poor track record given its wealth of heritage that it has and the immense potential that it possesses. Now, essentially what the state and the agencies essentially use 5 instruments. I'll leave the 6th one for a moment. The charters, which INTAC like agencies have put out as sort of a broad guiding principle of how conservation must be done, what are the ethics, how should one engage with craftsmen and so on. But most of the efforts are dependent on 2 things. 1, legislation, and 2, finance, which is funds. Legislation is only an immediate relief, a short-term relief. And that too, only if the state is willing to commit, not only just passing the act, but actually implement. Tamil Nadu is one of the cases where you have to act, but nothing much has happened. So the sheer presence of a legislation to protect heritage is of less consequence. We need more commitment. But how much can you protect and fence? For instance, we have the Monuments Protection Act. We have the Monuments Protection Authority. There is a regulation which says what you can build within the first few hundred meters and what you should not build and what you should be regulated in the next buffer zone. But we know what is the level of struggle there. Now, in terms of funds, the state funds generally on things culture is limited, and even less when it comes to conservation. So how to mobilize money? How would conservation efforts pay for itself, leave alone profitable, just pay for its own maintenance and sustenance? That's a huge challenge. The fourth one is planning. Now, essentially, most of them in the planning establishment view conservation as an antithesis of development. It's an irritant, an uncomfortable aspect of a city that they need to deal with, which comes in the way of development. But successful projects, either in Kerala or for that matter in Rajasthan, and to some extent in Madhya Pradesh, would tell us that the fundamental flaw is to look at conservation and development as two separate entities which are at loggerheads. What is emerging is conservation as a strategy to develop, because there are fixed assets, and these assets have both economic and cultural significance. It provides choice for people, and there are many other attributes and values, and they could be integrated with planning at the moment we don't see it as something coming in the way. And the current buzzword and the often touted tool is the transfer of development rights. What is the fundamental challenge facing any conservation projects? A building stands on a land. The value of the building diminishes, while the value of the land increases. In 15 years, you would find your land value either doubled or tripled, while the building value tumbles down. So theoretically, after every 15 years, the land value is so high, there's no point keeping the building because that comes in the way of recovering value which the land brings. What you bought for 15 lakhs is today about 1 crore, and you have a small building which comes in the way of utilizing it. So you demolish the building in order to recover the land value. So the exchange value is far more important than the use and the cultural value. In order to incentivize it, the government floated that whatever you lose by not developing an old building, you could sell it in the market and make money out of it. Theoretically, a very sound idea, but on the ground, it's not working. I'll come to it shortly. The last one, people often project that instruments of conservation and the idea of conservation are sort of Western. It's coming from a developed country, which makes less sense in a developing country. Partly true, some of the ideas, but it's not entirely culturally disconnected. The notion of Jeevnodharana or Punaramaipu as it is known, as we would know, my own ancestral house has been, I don't know how many times redone, probably 10 times, 15 times, but done in the same way, as much as possible using the similar materials. Because this notion of Punaramaipa, rejuvenating the structure, is both practical and necessity, and also a sort of connect, a cultural connect with the place. Now let me quickly go over the case of Chennai and probably wrap up with some points for us to talk about. I don't have to go over this for you. You know, that's one of the largest metropolis. The challenges are unique here. The city is a mosaic. It is made up of different textures. Okay, sorry. So each part of the city has been integrated. Particularly Chennai is a city of villages. wonderful work by Neil Basu would show how the many villages of Chennai were integrated, and those villages can be traced even today if you look at the road map pattern and some of these structures available. Now, it's also visible in its architecture, just as you see here. And the new comes, which you cannot stop in the metropolis. They're also something that we don't want to showcase, but it exists. Now, the fundamental problem in the case of Chennai, sorry, I think, is that the planning projects do not consider the different parts of the city as distinct elements with its own specificities. It paints the city with a single brush, a broad brush. But on the ground, things are varied, not only economically and also in terms of use. Its physical structure is so dramatically different. But as plans overlook again and again, and including the current mega project of expanding the city, which will now include all these small, wonderful temple-based towns, cities, including Sribembudur and Kanjipuram maybe, each of these settlements would lose its distinctiveness. It would be seen as an appendage to a city, as something which services the city rather than cherishing its own characteristics and value. Now, the institution-based planning emerges in Chennai from the late 50s, post-independence. And from its inception, Chennai's history, urban history, has not been considered. Probably most of them were inspired by an imagination of a modern city, for whom the existing historic fabric of the city was of little significance or an hindrance, and most of them focused on the peripheries and the new parts of Chennai, which is not something specific to Chennai. In most of the cities, you have basically three parts. You have the historic core, you have the colonial part, and then you have the new area. Most of the planning projects primarily focus either on the cantonment and the new area, leaving the old cities out, which was the case. So if you trace the planning history of Chennai, starting from the very first master plan of sort produced in 1959, published in 1960, through various plans, there are many that were done for Chennai, you would find them consistently ignoring the city. Let me demonstrate that, taking Georgetown as a case. You know, Georgetown was one of the, apart from Mylapore, Triplicane, and others which were predate colonial time, the Madras or the Chennai, as we now know, has close association with the colonial period. So the native town, or the black town as the Europeans called it, was a well-established settlement and substantially rebuilt after the French siege and capture of Madras. It had some lovely buildings, great spaces, something like this. But only a fragment of it is what is now available. However, some of the early traditions seem to continue, while the other structures struggle to exist. The spaces, the streets, these are the typical scenes. And in the process, we have also lost what, in my opinion, was some of the major urban projects in Madras, which was the creation of the People's Park towards the end of the 19th century, which was once a very wonderful space, a public space, a space where the bazaars, the Christmas fairs used to happen. And it's been a great place of gathering, attracting a lot of citizens. Over a period of time, sort of gets derelict. And today it's completely filled up beyond recognition. And for instance, strangely, you have a senator of Moore Market, literally a sort of a burial stone there, a tombstone there in the middle of the parking lot, which commemorates the old one. And so is the case of the water bodies. I'm sure Jayashree has a lot more to say about how we have treated with the water bodies. So the first master plan put in 1975 termed Georgetown as a commercial CBD and want to treat it as a commercial area instead of looking at it as a living, vibrant human settlement. As a result, both in our imagination and in our action, we have always looked at Georgetown as some kind of a godown for the old city. It's no more this wonderful city and space that it had or still has, but it was seen as some kind of a godown for the city, and we dealt with that. And we have to substantially blame it on the master plan, which could have set the things right at that point of time. Subsequent imaginations of Chennai, either as a global city or a smart city, has primarily divided the city into three things. New areas such as IT corridors, etc., becomes the exhibition, something we love to showcase. Something we are very uncomfortable of and we don't know what to do with it, something like Mylapore and Triplicane, we sort of museumize it, and it can only exist as some kind of a museum piece. They don't dovetail into the new. While there is a whole range of spaces in the city as backyard, which is beyond the interest and intervention of the state plans. And Georgetown, which at least could have existed as a museum part of the city, is now very much a part of the city's backyard. But that was not the case. For example, this lovely survey in 1860-61 completely details and surveys them, including the names of the owners, the extent of the land, etc. Unfortunately, these records are available only in the British archives. And a lot of attention was paid. And even private investment, for example, Broadway is the creation of a private investment, okay, which created this part of the city, which was once a very cherished place. And we hear a lot about it in the early newspapers and biographical accounts. Now, let me come to the present. Apart from master plan, which is probably the substantial reason why we lost it, other measures, primarily due to pressures from institutions like INTRAC, which really worked very hard for more than 10 years to get this act passed, is a toothless act. It's there, but can't do anything or doesn't do anything. And as I said, the transfer of development rights hardly has any takers because there are countervailing measures which the planning authorities themselves put. For instance, why would I want to deal with transfer of development rights as a developer when I can either violate with impunity or I can pay and get a premium FSI, which is basically if I pay more, I can build more. So I don't have to deal with people who have heritage buildings and you carry this certificate saying, you know, I have this piece of sort of a share, which I like to encash. It's not working. And also constantly the FSI is being revised, which is permission to build more. And as a result, the incentive given to people is diminished. Now, this is my last example of the Georgetown. About 2 years back, a notification was put for redeveloping Georgetown based on Mumbai's idea of what is called the cluster redevelopment. And what cluster redevelopment could do is an example that I've shown on the right side, which was the Bindi Bazaar area in Mumbai, where developers can agglomerate properties. In case of Mumbai, it was 4,000 square meters. In case of Chennai, it's almost 500 square meters, 1/10 of that, which means in Georgetown, this is particularly applicable to Georgetown, where if a developer comes and buys 2 properties or 3 properties, he would be allowed to build very high. He doesn't have to respect either the grid or heritage value. He would be allowed or should be allowed to build. It's primarily bringing money and investment into Georgetown because the government thinks that it can't put enough money there. While private investment in itself may not be a bad thing, idea, the form of development that is being proposed, which I'm told the plan is sort of ready and there's a consultant, we yet to know the details. This is again a big problem in a city like Chennai and many places. There are many things happening around in the city, around the city, including heritage and other things, but we hardly know what's happening. So there's a lack of transparency and participation. So we often react and we don't get a chance to engage with what's happening. I don't know even if we engage what would come of it, but at least there's some sort of a hope that we would participate in city planning. I'll finish here. The problem of conservation requires multiple strategies. So some of which I listed out. What is not there, which I would strongly wish it happens and see what one could do about it, is not to determine the significance of what is important and what is not important and what's valuable from some central place like Chennai or something. The significance has to be localized. Without making substantial local significance, one cannot expect local participation. Second, it's not just objects that matter like buildings, it is the value of the place, as in the case of Sriranga. To reduce the whole heritage effort only to the temple is grossly missing the fundamental planning principle of that city and its relationship both culturally and geographically with the larger landscape. Certainly the efforts have to be decentered, both in terms of governance and efficiency, also in terms of finance. One could mobilize better there. And of course, we need citizen groups. And the last, which I've already discussed, conservation has to be very much part of a development strategy and not an antithesis. I'll stop here, and probably if there are questions, we can later, we can discuss more.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful and very interesting talk. Thanks for throwing some light on various government schemes for financing and restoring heritage structures, and also discussing various strategies for retaining the character of a city during planning and development. Now I request Malavika to introduce Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan.
Good afternoon. Speaker is Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan. Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan works on issues of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecological restoration with special interest in wetlands. She has, to her credit, 30 scientific publications and 1 book. She currently serves as Cared Earth Managing Trustee. The talk today will focus on building a scientific understanding of the city's ecological character and its evolution that is required to value and conserve heritage, especially in the context of urban resilience. The talk will include description of sites, importance, and detailed methods and tools that will support the interest and involvement of citizens in conserving the city's natural heritage. Thank you, ma'am. We are honored to have you today. Over to Dr.
Thank you. The honor is mine. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon to all, and really a scintillating, mesmerizing presentation by Dr. Srivatsan. There was so much to learn. Thank you very much, Professor Srivatsan. I learned at least 4 different things about Chennai. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, let me begin by right away stating that whatever I'm going to be presenting is actually a summarized version of our work, Care Earth's work over the last 20 years on the city of Chennai. Well, much of it is evidence-based. There are also a couple of statements which I would be making, which are more ideas that are in the anvil, ideas that we are working on, hypotheses, very crude hypotheses. Now, the first line that I would like to begin with about Chennai is a coastal city located along the Bay of Bengal. Now, one may be left wondering as to why is this lady saying something as well known as this with such great emphasis. The point is, it's always been a coastal city, but has never been planned or considered a coastal city. And when we talk about a city being coastal, an entity being coastal, what we often tend to neglect and forget is the kind of coastal influence that the city would bring to the people, to the landscapes, to the flora and fauna. Not many of you are aware of the fact that 13 kilometers inland of Chennai, Chennai is still a coast. In fact, Nungambakam, places such as Kumiripundi, Minju, these are all coastal areas where there is a very strong coastal influence, saline influence, brackish water influence, and the flora and fauna are typical of coastal areas. But it has always been planned taking examples from other cities. And this is very typically been the case since the British started ruling us. Earlier to that, Srivatsan in fact very beautifully summarized it as an agglomeration of villages. I would go a step forward and say it's an agglomeration of fishing hamlets and villages. Chennai is totally coastal, and the fact that we do not have an inland-based festival, traditional festival, or a commemorative event should tell us that it's a coastal city. The fact that most of our beautiful landmarks are coastal in their orientation should reiterate the fact that Chennai has been a coastal city. Now, the coast to Chennai is a double-edged weapon. I know a lot of people get angry when I say this, but let me still go ahead and say that. It protects us. It protects us because it acts as a buffer to whatever we're doing inland. But it's also the habitat that renders us extremely vulnerable because whether we like it or not, we are sitting on the periphery of a very warm ocean which has been globally designated as a vulnerable area. So these two factors actually define the natural heritage of Chennai. The fact that we are coastal and the fact that we are naturally vulnerable define Chennai. May I have the next slide, please? Now, how has Chennai historically developed? Thankfully, we can't colonize the sea, nor can we think of entering North Chennai, I mean beyond North Chennai, because we would hit the administrative boundary of Andhra Pradesh. But otherwise, what we have been following is a pattern where we have these long lines actually crawling out into the urban, peri-urban and rural areas. In fact, what typifies Chennai's growth, if at all we can call it growth, is expansion using linear structures. And at the end of each of these linear structures, we have these extremely tenacious extremes. In fact, Srivatsan spoke about the beautiful villages that you still see in the periphery of Chennai. I would go one step further and say you can in fact see some of these beautiful villages within Chennai. They're very tenacious and that's what has been contributing to reduce vulnerability of the city. And it's a city of habitat mosaic. This is a very unique feature to Chennai. Unlike many other parts, the only comparable city which has this kind of habitat mosaics is Mumbai and probably Mangalore. Most of the cities are homogeneous. So you would find planning a bit more easy as compared to a city like Chennai, where the habitat mosaic is very well defined and the scale of the habitats is also very small. In fact, you would have a mosaic with 1 hectare or at best 5 hectare kind of habitat type defining the mosaic. It's also a city that's been grossly transformed, especially since the British colonized and, in fact, ruled from this part of the country for at least some brief period of time. Also, because we've had the presence of many other European entities here. We had the Portuguese who transformed part of Chennai to suit their aspirations and their scenarios. Likewise, the Dutch and then the French, of course, briefly when they ruled over parts of Chennai, where Fort St. George is. So each of them have contributed to this transformation, leading to a fragmentation of habitats. In fact, contiguous habitats are not present in Chennai. And that's a factor that is of serious concern. In fact, when people talk about Pallikarnai Marsh as a large contiguous area, we are left wondering because contiguous is an area that's beyond 1,000 hectares, not small patches of 500, 400 hectares. The city now does not have contiguous patches of habitats. The next slide, please. Much to the anger of people who promote tree planting in the city, I will have to say that the original vegetation, as evidenced by remnant habitats as well as some carbon dating work that's been happening in the city, has been the scrub palm grass vegetation. In fact, sparse kind of tree cover is what typifies Chennai, or what typified Chennai. It used to be called the Naidal kind of a landscape. But that has been ignored, and we have a lot of non-native arboreal plants being planted here. And what is very sad for us as an ecologist, as a person pursuing biology as a career option, the tree planting is being celebrated. And in fact, every Chennai resident who I get to meet talks about the loss of tree cover. Fact of the matter is, trees were not the dominant type of plants in the city. The vegetation cover is also very weak, that is why in terms of species. Coastal areas are typified by sparse vegetation with very little number of species. What we are trying to emulate or trying to reconstruct as a heritage, the red herring, we're trying to create a system where there is a lot of diversity of species and a lot of an increased number of trees. This shot is actually not from Chennai, it's from a place close to Chennai called Maracana. This is how Chennai was historically. In fact, if you look at some of these old paintings, old photographs in the archives, you would see many photographs that are like this. But now this is sadly absent, even in protected systems such as the Gindi National Park. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yet another factor that we celebrate a lot about Chennai, the rivers of Chennai. I deliberately put a question mark here. Let me tell you why. The next slide will tell you. The next slide, please. We all talk about Chennai being drained by at least the GCC area, the Greater Chennai Corporation area, and then the Chennai metropolitan area being drained by 3 or 4 rivers, beginning from the north, Aranyar, and then Kostalyar, and then Kuvam, and then of course Adyar. While I can accept, or it's easy to accept that Kostalyar and Aranyar are rivers because there's a lot of cultural aspect associated with it. There are nominate temples. We are still, I would go on to say that celebrating Kuvam and Adyar as rivers is actually very fallacious because you really don't have a cultural connect. These are essentially systems meant to drain excess water from a chain of tanks. Kuvam has been a kind of an offshoot from the case of Anakat, and it's meant to drain excess water. Likewise, Adyar is meant to drain excess water that comes from Adanur tank. More importantly, rivers such as Kuvam or Adyar are very distinct from Kotastalyar and Aranyar. The problem that we have is we treat all of them alike. We all treat all of them as perennial rivers. These are highly seasonal rivers. All 4 of them are highly seasonal. And there's nothing in Chennai that has not been manipulated or worked upon by humans. In fact, this diagram, which I've got from the Public Works Department, with a lot of difficulty, tells you that there's no system that's actually inviolate. So to come up with conservation plans for a single river or act upon a single river and celebrate them as a river is once again very, very fallacious. Every part of Chennai is hydrologically connected and there's no science behind this connecting. And this has been happening over a long period of time, ever since the Chembrambakam reservoir was carved out. From then, without a stop, this has been done. And in fact, much of this is unknown as well. That's the factor that we need to reckon about Chennai. The factor of unknown is very, very high when it comes to hydrology, when it comes to flora and when it comes to fauna. Next slide, please. This is a slide that many of you would have seen many times. Pardon me, I couldn't find a better set of slides. We did some time ago, we took a look at what actually was happening with Chennai's wetlands. Because you have still have patches of natural wetlands and a large number of man-made water bodies. We wanted to look at what was happening to this. You would find that between the time period 1980 and 2010, 65% of the wetland area was lost in Chennai. The benchmark year seems to be 1990, coincident with the liberalization that the country went through. What remains intact without losing its habitat or without being fragmented are the reservoirs. Everything else, without an exception, has been worked upon. So if somebody is claiming that, including carers, is claiming that we are restoring a wetland, we are only telling you the half truth. Much of it has already been lost. In fact, one of the things that typifies loss of wetlands in Chennai is, while the area may remain more or less intact in terms of its shape, in the middle you have a lot of linear intrusions fragmenting the wetlands. So you really don't have a system that you can work upon, and that in turn has influenced the kind of plants and animals it supports. Not many of us know that Chennai used to be one of the hotspots for salt-tolerant variety of paddy. But now when we talk of salt-tolerant variety of paddy, we only talk about places like Odisha. There's still, as I said, I repeat, a lot of unknown when it comes to the ecology of Chennai. Next slide, please. Of trees and tree cover, since all of us are very fond of trees, and in fact the government takes it upon as their single mandate to green the city, I thought we could also consider the tree heritage of Chennai city. Next slide, please. Just as we looked at the wetlands, we also took a look at what is happening with the green cover. This is not tree cover, this is green cover. It includes all plant forms. So we looked at once again 2 benchmark years to see what is happening with the city. And within the same time frame of 1980 to 2010, look at the way that Chennai has been rendered almost bare. And these are not trees that have been lost. These are actually green area that has been lost. These are orchards, grasslands, wetland buffers, all of it has been lost. Whatever you will see as being remnant, still as green, are areas that are under some form of protection, such as the Gindi National Park, IIT, or private dwellings. How am I making this statement? I'm making this statement basically because we feel that it's not loss of trees or water bodies that Chennai's heritage currently stands at. It's a complete loss of the green and blue character, and these are intertwined. You cannot talk about Chennai's green without talking about blue or vice versa. And just as we all discussed resilience, we also know that cities are extremely uncertain environments, and Chennai has been ranked one of the most uncertain environments globally. Because the factor of unknown is very, very high. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is what I spoke about. The next one, please. So after Vardha, 2015 was a kind of a wake-up call because of the Chennai floods. Although the floods are not new to Chennai, we've been having them almost on a recurrent basis every decade. So 2015, everybody was very excited about the floods. Let me brag a bit here. In 2005, I had predicted that the next flood would be in 2015, not so much because I'm a believer in astrology, but because science indicated that the next flood was going to happen in 2015. This was based on precipitation data. So people were mocking me at that point of time, saying this lady never says anything nice. So anyway, it came true, and 2015 followed by the Vardha cyclone of 2016 was a big wake-up call. So when the 2016 Vardha happened, people were very upset. Chennai citizens were very upset by the tree fall that happened. An estimated 1 lakh number of trees were lost in that particular cyclone, and everybody came up with their theories on native species, indigenous species, natural species. Because here I have to respectfully differ with Srivatsan. While I fully agree with him that activism does play a very strong role in mobilizing community opinion and influencing policy, the Chennai activists are oblivious to science when it comes to conservation of natural resources. And these kind of irresponsible statements saying that it was native trees that speak and then naturalized and exotic trees that fell was completely erroneous because it had nothing to do with the botany part of it, it had more to do with the physics part of it. Whatever was lost was primarily because of the eye of the cyclone landing very close to Chennai. Anyway, that's a different discussion altogether. We were asked to develop a plantation strategy. In fact, we were asked to develop a tree strategy, which I refused, and we said, okay, let's do a plantation strategy. This phenomenal work, bit of work of 10 volumes, still lies in BCC, Greater Chennai Corporation Office, not being used. I don't think any more than 10 people have actually seen this particular document. But it was an 8-month task with a team of 36 researchers. What did we look at? We looked at 527 parks. Yes, ecologically speaking, that's a very significant number. Greater Chennai Corporation area has 527 parks. We looked at 450 kilometers of roads. This is on ground field assessment. 43 wetlands and just 30 OSRs because much of the records on OSRs not available. And then what did we map? We mapped green cover, we mapped vegetation, we mapped parks, green blocks, road network, water boundary. We mapped everything that could be mapped. One of the things that came in very surprisingly as a data point was when we first undertook the mapping, Chennai came up as a very green area. In fact, I was quite surprised and taken aback that there was so much greenery. Then when we actually did the ground survey, we found that 80% of the greenery was actually being contributed by individual homes and not so much roads. The trees that were inside the homes were actually overhanging to the roads, giving this artificial feeling of the city being green. So having looked at all this, we actually created a series of interactive maps which we presented to stakeholders. It is here that I have to make a specific mention about the kind of stakeholder analysis that we had. This was held in Amma Maligar in Greater Chennai Corporation. Corporation is not at all keen on having this. In fact, they said people would be very unruly. They would scream at us, they would shout at us, they would hold us responsible. Please go to the next slide. I forgot to. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. I'm sorry I didn't say it. Yeah, this is the one. Please hold. Yeah, as I was saying, corporation was not very keen on having this because they were worried that people would get unruly. They were worried that the government would be accused of inaction. But what we had was a very well organized, a very mature, a very deep kind of a conversation with people. 850 people representing the 20 zones of Chennai showed up in that consultation. And they were very clear about what they wanted and even more clear about what they didn't want. What was very evident across the 850 people was all of them believed that Chennai had to be a place like Nilgiri. or the Western Ghats, any part of Western Ghats, densely planted. Because that was the message that had been ingrained into them that Chennai is bereft of trees because nobody is planting trees. Chennai needs trees because that is how it has historically been. So when one of the speakers said that this is not the case, he was shoot down in the face, saying, no, we want tree cover. We want a lot of trees. So we said, okay, we'll incorporate this suggestion into the plan and let us come up with a one area kind of situation. Next slide, please. So what is the result of some significance when it comes to Chennai's green area? According to the State Forest report, 9.0% of the city is under green cover. From this 9.03% is reserve forest, national park, wildlife sanctuary. Very interestingly, almost all the reserve parks and forests that we have in Chennai, sorry that Dr. Dutt is not here, the watch for this, are areas that were erstwhile mined. In fact, when people talk about Nanmangalam forest as a celebration as an area to go to, it is very correct, it's a place of immense biodiversity. What is very little known or rather not known is the fact that Nanmangalam is one of the many abandoned mines areas that were referred by the forest department. So you have, wherever you see this lush green areas in Chennai, these are secondary forests. These are forests that have been created by us because the earlier use has stopped. Much of the time this use has been mining, not anything else. Vegetated area is only 15% of BTC is vegetated. 8.5 square meters is what the area as a green cover per capita. It is very, very low compared to even all India average. In fact, Chennai is one of those areas where we really have very low green cover available to citizens. And look at the tree diversity. This is the most shocking. It's just 119 species, of which 6 species are the most dominant. In fact, it's almost like saying Ashwatthama, Atahasindara. When we say 190 species typified Chennai tree diversity, sounds marginally okay. When we actually get into the details, only 6 species that contribute to 80% of this diversity. And all the 6 species are actually coastal in orientation. Next slide, please. The next slide. So what we have actually recommended is about 100 species of, no, the previous one. That's okay. Yeah. 100 species of indigenous. Next one. 100 species of indigenous, storm-tolerant, durable, and elegant trees have been recommended. Not that it was accepted, but we have recommended. One of the things that contributes to poor tree diversity in Chennai is the fact that it's coastal. Once again, going back to what I said in slide 1. You need trees that are highly storm tolerant, also tolerant to winds and salinity conditions. 13 kilometers in north, you still have saline conditions in Chennai. So we have recommended about 100 indigenous species, and the distribution of it is what will be detailed in the next slide. Next slide. We have said arterial and Raj roads, we should have trees with wider canopies, but straight boles. You cannot have a lot of branching. 30 species have been identified. And I have to confess that not all 30 of them are indigenous. They are indigenous as well as naturalized. So to say that we will plant only native trees, only indigenous trees is very fallacious. It's nothing like that. You can also accommodate naturalized trees. The problem is, only those trees that can run amok. We invade the species. All of the trees are okay, equally vulnerable or equally gritty when it comes to tolerating tropical cyclones. Subarterial and bus roads, we have recommended 30 species. Coastal areas, the previous one, the coastal areas, we recommended 60. Medians and traffic islands, we recommended 19. And water bodies and riparian areas, which are wetland buffers, we recommended 17 species. Next slide. So the impact of planting 10 lakh trees in Chennai can be realized only after 15 years. And then the average tree canopy diameter attains 6 meters. So it takes 15 years for a tree in Chennai to attain its girth of 6 meters. That tells you that Chennai is certainly not a tree-friendly city. Green cover of Chennai is projected to increase by 35% of the present level to reach approximately 87 square kilometers, provided none of these new master plans, none of the new demolition zones, none of the new FSI come into being. So this is a statement that's supposed to make us feel good and nothing more than that, and that's why we don't leave behind for our children. Next slide, please. When we did this, This was at a very mega level of a city. But then we decided we would need to take a deeper look at what was happening at the level of a ward. We were recommended to take a ward in South Chennai because it's easy to work. So that was a challenge. We didn't want an easy area to work. We picked up an area that was supposedly very difficult. And this project, we called it urban buffers, and we took a look at one of the wards in Ambattur district. In fact, this is a very beautiful rendering of that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just like architecture and urban planning, from the previous one. Architecture and urban planning, ecologists also use the concept of nodes and connectors. So in fact, we try to use the same concept here, look at nodes and connectors that means by which a city could, what could be planned better. And this is what we identified as areas which needed intervention, areas that needed some restoration, areas that needed to be conserved. Now, one of the things that we learned the hard way in Chennai that you cannot protect a place and expect it to bounce back. By the same logic, you cannot restore a place and then expect it to stay restored. Nor can you expect conservation to happen without any problems over a large period of time. You need a combination of all these. And restoration is certainly not 100% golden chain. So at best, what we can assume is what one would designate as very poor restoration, which is about 20% of what was originally there. What was originally there needs to be defined accurately here. The problem that we have is we define the original restoration target erroneously and then attempt to go towards that benchmark, which often leaves us at a point where the corollary costs are very heavy. For example, many projects in Chennai now look very green, and people talk about how it has attracted 200 species of birds, 300 species of birds, so what it has led to is it has contributed to increased vulnerability to flooding. We decided we will not fall back that and work on this particular ward in Ambattur, and we looked at the possibilities of connecting the remnants of whatever existed originally using very fair, sustainable means. And this is a broad diagrammatic representation of that kind of thing. We also realized that multi-use modules are the ones that we need to push for. So that is how the city works historically. We did not have beaches exclusively for one set of residents and beaches exclusively for the fishermen. We had mixed use. That's what contributed to the city's destiny. We decided that we create this as a plan. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. And we engaged with people on what needed to be done. Very interestingly, the point or the heritage points on which this particular ward was very galvanized and which they wanted to be restored, protected by the local burial ground. I mean, for those of us who are not very keen on such entities, it would have been a shock. But people had a very beautiful explanation to that. They said this is an abandoned burial ground, a cemetery of sorts. The children now used to play. So my question to them was, aren't you worried about children being in close proximity to graves and burials and all that? To which the local women responded with a very beautiful anecdote. They said, we are all close to death anyway. And Chennai city, they said, show us a place where there is no burial ground. Every part of Chennai was historically as a burial ground. You have tombstones, you have small markers, you also have places where people are just being cremated. So that was a very good resonating point for us. And in fact, we recommended a revival of the burial ground there, and that's what contributed to the city's plan for 264 burial. At the end of it, what Chennai actually looks for in terms of resilience, in terms of building a good understanding of flora and fauna, is typified with this one room element that we saw, which is fascinating for us in number 2. This is a one room element of this lady, Saraswati, who's standing there with her children, with her child and her husband behind. She's got close to 40 plants in this area. In the small space, she's got 40 plants and none of them is rescued. But still she's contributing to the diversity and the character, ecological character of the city. This is the mode that should work ideally for Chennai, and this is what I wanted to end with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for this talk on the ecological heritage of the city. It was a very interesting and colorful presentation. Your topic on plantation strategy and the various detailed project reports and those species and their patterns were all new to some of us, but we really enjoyed the session. Now I hand over the mic to Shiv Rawat, Senior National Coordinator, Delhi Intact, for the Q&A session. Shiva?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. I think the talks today were really enriching, very informative, and we all come back with various dimensions of heritage and how we can engage with it more dynamically as heritage-sensitive citizens. So, moving to the next segment of question and answers, I would request the participants with any queries, any questions, any reflections that they may have in relation to the talks that we've heard during the day, could raise their hands, or maybe they could even type out your questions in the chat box. I also understand that the YouTube, there were two questions. I think there was one question related to why sandalwood was used for carving, but I think that has been addressed because of the nature of the wood. It's very soft and it's quite malleable. And I think there was another question on YouTube which was directed at Mr. Dutt, which was about I think Sir said that, which was basically about the regulations around red saunders and the time of plantation of the species and the certificates for cutting the trees and legal sales and exports being difficult. And I think the resulting criminalizing of and growing of woodcutters, and what basically then happens to sandalwood. I believe this question would be addressed by the speaker through email at slightly later moment. In case there are any other questions, I would request the participants to please feel free to put it into the chat box, and you may also raise your hands. I see one question that is coming from Ma'am Jayashree, where Ma'am is talking about, is asking us if we could be informed a little more about the Japanese Miyawaka forest, and would it be suitable for Chennai? So, sir, this question is from Jayashree ma'am, and ma'am is inquiring about the Japanese Miyawaka forest and if it would be suitable for Chennai. So, sir, in case sir would like to come in and respond to it. In the meantime, anyone else with any other questions, we would be glad to respond to those. Or do we have Jayashree ma'am here with us? So this was a question from Miss Geeta, and another similar question is coming from Miss Shivani, where ma'am is asking about the invasive species of trees.
You want me to respond to both the questions?
Yes, please, ma'am. Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm not a big follower of the Miyawaki mode of forest plantations. These are not forests, these are plantations. You correct you on that. Primarily because this is dense plantation. What has been repeatedly stressing upon is Chennai needs sparse plantation. You need Palmyra trees or trees which have straight boles with thickets around them. Miyawaki recommends dense plantation because that is what has worked in areas of work where this forest type has originated, plantation type has originated. So I would not certainly recommend Miyawaki for Chennai. The second question, when it comes to invasive alien species, it's a big problem. There's a lot of background noise.
May I request all the participants to please put yourselves on mute while the speaker is speaking. Request all participants to please put yourselves.
Now, each one can unmute themselves, those who want to talk. Yeah. Speakers can unmute themselves.
Yeah, now I'm able to unmute. Yes. As regards invasive alien species, I think Chennai is typified by this when it comes to trees. Invasive alien species are trees. Prosopis is the only problem that we have. Others have not yet reached a point where they can run amok. Not at the designation of invasive alien species. The Prosopis has virtually invaded the city and destroyed much of its fragile habitat. In fact, for those of us who celebrate IIT Madras, where we've worked for the last 10 years trying to restore the campus to recover the black ball, 65% of the campus is overrun by prosopis. That's the kind of impact it can create. Invasive alien species management, It's a very, very difficult and as of now not doable kind of a task, but we need to address it. The bigger problem is the fact that Tamil Nadu as a state has still not designated any species officially as invasive alien species. So if you and I scream hoarse about one species being invasive alien species, there is an equal number of concerns with you to say it is not. And we don't rely on global data. It's a situation of great alarm, but not much has been done on that.
Ma'am, there is another question for you, which is from Ma'am Tara Murli, which is about urban fruit production. And ma'am, your thoughts on that. And followed by another question from Ms. Geeta, but that is directed at Intact Chennai chapter. So after your response, ma'am, I would move to Sujata, ma'am.
Urban food production is something that's gaining momentum now, but historically Chennai has always had food trees. Bananas are part of Chennai's character, part of Chennai's landscape. Bananas, guavas, pomegranates, coconuts, all these have been part of our legacy. Nothing is to be alarmed about when this is being recommended. But we also have to watch out for new colonization by primates. I live in a place called Mayapur in Chennai, where we have at home I have a couple of mango trees. Last season, we had the privilege of being visited by some monkeys. Now, we were speculating as to where these monkeys came from. Most people said IIT, but then we were able to trace that it's not from IIT, but it's from a place close to the MLA hospital in Jaipur. We tracked the monkeys, but that's also something that we need to be wary about. And one of the things that I've always said is when you recommend something, you also need to look at what is directly the impact, but also the kind of corollary impact that's coming. Most of us want food trees, but we don't want any organism associated with it. We want fruit trees which we can go and pluck them. That is the kind of scenario that we're looking at, the idea that we won't do it. But if we are willing to have much more broad-based fruit type, and even go to the extent of saying at least humane approach to nature, then fruit trees are certainly recommended in India. Otherwise, restricted. If you have fruit trees and then complain about the pigeons, about the monkeys, about the parakeets that come in, there's no point in that.
For you, which is again, if you could share a little more with us about the trees which would be suitable for plantation here in the city, and it would be very valuable for members from Intact Chennai chapter to be a bit more acquainted about the tree species which you feel would be suitable for plantation here, ma'am.
Yeah, 100 tree species are found suitable. That's what we have recommended. In fact, depending on the kind of conditions that exist on the road within homesteads, within the kind of canopy that already exists, the kind of buildings that we do. I'll be happy to send an extract of this because to detail 100 species now is difficult. To prioritize that is also not really correct. So I'll be happy to send it to Madam Sujata Shankar and that could be shared with Intact. So these are available. In fact, we've even given planting guidelines. We've given similar performance groups and what kind of issues that you probably face. That's something that I'd be happy to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? Any other thoughts or reflections? Yes. So, ma'am, there is one more question which is coming forward, which is about water availability for trees. And due to water shortages, isn't it harder to cultivate trees?
It's really, we're not recommended those trees that provide water. We recommended trees that can thrive on very little water. For instance, if we are recommending a tree like Terminalia ancina, very charismatic tree, and people don't know about it, we will not certainly recommend that it be planted in the heart of the city. But most probably it be planted on the bank of Adyar or somewhere where there is regular water supply. Most of the trees that we have recommended for the city of Chennai, hinterland, inland areas, are trees that can thrive on very little water and very dirty. But the concern is well taken. Water is a very big issue.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. There is now a question for Dr. Srivastavan. And sir, the question is, from your experience at Chennai and Ahmedabad, do you see any major difference in attitudes and ideologies of the citizens towards their perception to conservation-oriented development?
But generally, my observation of Ahmedabad, the ODA, which is equivalent to CMDA, and the Ahmedabad Corporation, they're both more enterprising. They're willing to invest in new ideas, and also as an academic administrator, I found it's a bit easy to work in some of the government agencies. Things get done quickly, easily, relatively speaking. So the city in general, I think, is a bit enterprising, and that rubs into the government organizations. And that's one of the reasons why they were able to implement some of the new ideas. Since until 80s or 70s, it was known for its architectural developments. But post 90s, it's known for its planning initiatives. Of course, not everything is rosy about Ahmedabad. It has its own share of problems. But compared to what we are able to get things done in Chennai and what you can get things done in Ahmedabad, I think it's a better city in that sense. And even as a city, it's things happen, vehicles move, and relatively a better. Of course, the weather is something that's a personal opinion.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions? I think I don't see any more questions. So if we may move to the next segment. Thank you very much for all your reflections, and I hope that this helps us think in more deeper ways how we can engage with heritage as good citizens. Moving over to Ma'am Deepika for the next segment.
Thank you, Shiva. On behalf of the Intact Chennai chapter, it is my pleasure to thank Dr. Sughato Dutt on his valuable and interesting insights on the conservation of sandalwood trees in southern India. Dr. Srivatsan's talk on the city and town planning and its challenges and his emphasis that conservation and development should go hand in hand was extremely thought-provoking. I would like to thank Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan for creating an awareness about successful biodiversity and ecological projects that she has been involved with for so many years. I would like to thank Dr. Rani Vedamuthu, Dean, School of Planning and Architecture, Chennai, for her informative and important talk on the importance of citizenship and heritage education among faculty members. We are grateful to Nalini Thakur, retired professor and dean of studies at the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, where she put in more than 40 years of service, for her very wise words today. Our sincere thanks to all the esteemed principals and teachers who have joined together for our webinar today. Your enthusiasm and involvement in citizenship and heritage education is very valuable to the younger generation. Our sincere thanks to HEX, especially Punima Dutt for her presentation and Shiva Rahavat for the Q&A session for today's program. To Sujata Shankar, Tara Murli, our heartfelt thanks for the encouragement, support, and guidance in making this webinar so successful. Thanks again to all my enthusiastic young Intact team members, especially Saumya for helping design the invitation, Padma for the technical support, and Malvika for comparing today's session. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank all the audience for spending their valuable Saturday morning in tuning in today's webinar and making this program all the more interactive and memorable. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
The teachers were here in large numbers. Maybe we should thank them, teachers and principals.
Yeah, I just did.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I missed that.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all the esteemed principals and teachers who have joined us in the webinar today. Your enthusiasm and involvement in citizenship and heritage education is very valuable to us and to the younger generation. Thank you, teachers and principals, and thank you everyone for your participation today.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri.
For the group photograph, ma'am.
Yes, can we have a group photographs?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Srivatsan. Hi, Srivatsan. It's a long time. And it's Intact brought us together, and Intact is also bringing the reunion together. That's nice.
Koshi, glad you were here.
Thanks, Sujata. Thanks. Tara is also there, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Koshi.
Hi, Tara.
So,
I hope Srivatsan is here for the group photo.
He's here. He's here.
Jayashri.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
everyone is here.
Catch up with you later, Lilian.
Please stay. Sorry, this is the virtual group photo. That's a different mode. But
May I request for the videos to be please turned on? We have 3 pages, so we're going page wise. Page 1, I think the last row we don't have the videos on, and Ms. Deepthi, Abhishek. Thank you. We'll move to page 2 now. Page 2 and page 3, request all the participants to please turn on your video so that we can go forward and take the photograph. Page 2 and page 3, please. Page through Ma'am Lakshmi, Santana, Kritika, Kriti, Sir Arun, Karki,